welcome to the February 13th, 2024 regular City Council meeting. I'd now like, I'm sorry, I already said that. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel or at longmontpublicmedia.org/watch or Comcast channels 8 or 880. May we have a roll call, please, Don?
Mayor Peck.
Present.
Councilmember Christ. Councilmember Hidalgo-Ferring. Councilmember Martin. Councilmember McCoy. Councilmember Rodriguez. Councilmember Yarbrough. Mayor, you have a quorum.
As a reminder to the public, the rules for providing public comment are as follows. Each speaker must give their name and address and is limited to 3 minutes. Only Longmont residents and employees of the City of Longmont may speak during first call public invited to be heard, and you must sign up on the list prior to the start of this meeting. Persons wishing to speak on a specific second reading or public hearing item are asked to add their name to the speaker list for that specific item prior to the start of the meeting. Anyone may speak, and no sign-up is required to speak during final call, public invited to be heard. May I have a motion to approve the January 23rd minutes?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy and seconded by Councilor Hidalgo-Ferring to move the January 23 minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. How do you? Okay. Both. Both. Yeah. Yes. And that carries unanimously. Do we have any agenda revisions?
Mayor, we do. We have item 9B is being pulled from the agenda, ordinance 2024-16,
Thank you.
being pulled entirely.
Okay. And do councilors have any motions to add agenda items to future agendas? Councilor Martin.
No, I want to pull something from the consent agenda, but that's later, correct?
Yeah. We'll keep you in mind. We're ready for the city manager's report.
Report, Mayor, Council.
Thank you. And we have no special reports and presentations, so we're going right to the first call public invited to be heard. The first one on the list is Joanne Austin, and remember that we need your name and address. You have 3 minutes. Good job. Can you pull that microphone closer to you, Joanne?
How's
Perfect.
that?
That's great.
Joanne Austin, 419 Terry Street. Mayor Peck, City Council members. Today, sorry Lance for stepping on your toes, is Mardi Gras Day, Shrove Tuesday, and tomorrow is Valentine's Day and the beginning of Lent. So you can decide which holiday you remember receiving my gift. In no way do I mean this gift to be disrespectful. I have watched city council meetings for many years. Not only this council, but many before you struggle to know just how council meetings should be conducted. You and several councils before you have been very lucky to have a mayor pro tem to guide you through meetings when it becomes obvious mayors and council members have never educated themselves regarding rules of order. These are big shoes to fill, Susie. So I am gifting 7 books of Robert's Rules of Order, 1 for each council member. I urge you to re-gift this book if it seems it is no longer an asset to you. I also want to thank the poor council members who voted in favor of HB 241152. You understand the reality of housing for the future and for the future generations. We must embrace change. In closing, Wednesday starts spring training for the Chicago Cubs pitchers and catchers. Hope springs eternal. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Kathy Partridge.
Hello, I'm Kathy Partridge. I live at 2719 Denver Avenue here in Longmont. And I am here this evening on behalf of the East County Housing Opportunity Coalition, known as ECHO, and Together Colorado. And we are urging the council's support for HB 241098, which is for-cause eviction. In Longmont, we believe in taking care of our community so everyone, no matter the color of their skin, what language we speak, or how much is in our wallet, can thrive. Housing for all is a council priority. And Longmont has been an out-front example to other communities in the state when it comes to taking care of fellow residents' housing needs, including putting time, effort, and dollars into creating more affordable housing. In addition to increasing housing options, we believe that more should be done to help keeping people housed. For-cause eviction legislation would give Coloradans, including our Longmont neighbors, a greater sense of housing security and a safe and stable place to call home. We know that stable housing is key to mental health and learning for children. HB 1098 seeks to guard against actions by bad actor landlords who unnecessarily disrupt that stability. This bill will not remove any measures currently in law that allow a landlord to evict a tenant if a tenant violates their lease, such as non-payment of rent, health and safety violations, or not carrying lease violations. It also allows landlords to not renew a lease if the landlord or their family member plan to move into the unit. The unit is to be sold, or significant renovations or demolition is needed. This should give the landlord, including Longmont Housing Authority, the protections they need to safeguard their property. In preparing for this bill, we heard countless stories of landlords who discriminated against tenants based on their race, for complaining about uninhabitable conditions of their housing, and for other reasons, like they wanted to rent the unit to a third party. In particular, post-Marshall Fire, we saw a lot of lease terminations for complaints about smoke and ash damage. Our families deserve better than this. HB 1099 is somewhat revolutionary in that it shifts the burden to the landlord to be able to document reasons not to rent to someone, instead of a burden on the tenant to find a new home when the landlord decides capriciously they no longer want to rent to them. If we are serious about keeping people housed, which is much cheaper than building new housing, Longmont should support HB 1098. East County Housing Opportunity Coalition and Together Colorado strongly urge the council to support HB 1098. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Gary Hodges.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Gary Hodges. I live at 2148 Stewart Street. So, last 2 weeks I spoke about wind and solar power and the illusion that these power sources provide some benefit over combustion. And I'm going to talk about EVs tonight. And EVs really have the same illusion that there's some benefit of an EV over an internal combustion engine. And this is really trivial to discover. It's not hard. You can dig into the literature if you want, and you'll find a lot of that's out there. And across the board, they use really optimistic projections. Volkswagen has done a study on this. You can find this nice plot that they've done that shows over the lifespan, that's including manufacturer and end of life. But there's really no appreciable difference between an EV and an internal combustion engine. So, so on that optimistic projections, we saw something similar to that when Platte River gave that talk last year. where they prefaced every plot they showed. These are our most optimistic projections. And they were doing it for a different reason. I think it was to just so you all would understand the futility of wind and solar actually doing anything. Why is the state pushing, tonight you're going to talk about charging stations, so why is the state doing this? And I'll offer maybe an example with the state lottery where the generally less affluent fund recreation for the more affluent in the open space areas. And so maybe there's something like that. Maybe the more affluent are hopeful to make the less affluent fund their charging stations and networks so that their second or third cars, this just makes it easier on them. But really, the question is really, what do we do as a city and about this thing? And because there's no benefit, and there's really a cost. If this goes in, there's going to be more CO2. There's not going to be less of it. So my encouragement as a city would be to really slow walk this, what the state's doing. And if eventually forced into it, to just do whatever the absolute bare minimum. But I've got a better idea for you than just doing that. And that's for our city to be bold, to take some really bold action right now and write a letter, call to the state and, take a stand and say, we're really unwilling to do this because it's not a good idea. It's actually worse. It's a worse outcome than what's it's intended to produce. And so it's, let's take a stand for the less affluent in our city, and let's take a stand for the environment and push back on this and push back on it as hard as we can. All right, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Lance Whitaker.
I got a little ammo still left. My name's Lance Whitaker. My birthday's on Saturday, so you can all mail my packages to 1750 Collier Street. Today is also Galentine's Day. I have something in my pocket, so you need to know what day it is today in order to know what's in my pocket. It's also National Cheddar Day. It's also National Pancake Day and National Tortellini Day. It is also Fat Tuesday. So, as you can imagine, I have beads in my pocket today. I'd like to talk a little bit about electromagnetic fields today. I know there's a lot of residents that are worried about electromagnetic fields on the meters. And I just want to make sure you all know that while science does not know a lot about electromagnetic fields, we do know they exist and we can measure them. So, we can measure the amount of electromagnetic fields that are around those meters to ensure the public that they put off very little. We can also measure radio frequencies, ultraviolet waves, and all other things, and graviton waves and everything else. But to ensure the public on the electromagnetic field that surrounds our meters, we should just write it and just get the meter, turn it on, get the electromagnetic field, and just display it, because they are very little. There's not much electromagnetic field around your meters. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Lance. Seeing no one else on the list, I'm going to close the first call, public invited to be heard. We are now at the consent agenda. Dawn, would you mind reading the consent agenda into the record?
Absolutely, Mayor Peck. The ordinances on tonight's consent agenda will be on second reading and public hearing on February 27th, 2024. 9A is ordinance 2024-15, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2024. I won't read 9B because that's the one that's been removed from the agenda. 9C is ordinance 2024-17, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 15.05, Section 15.05.080 of the Longmont Municipal Code concerning electric vehicle parking infrastructure, development standards, and amending Chapter 15.10, Section 15.10.020. 9D is Resolution 2024-10, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Colorado Department of Human Services Behavioral Health Administration for a grant in support of the LEAD and CORE programs. And 9E is Resolution 2024-11, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Longmont Department of Public Safety and the Douglas County Sheriff's Office regarding shared access to and use of the Rook Armored Critical Incident Vehicle.
Thank you, Dawn. Does anyone want to pull items from this agenda? Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Yes, I would like to pull items C and E from the consent agenda.
Okay, and would you move the agenda then?
If no one else has any desire to pull anything, I move the consent agenda minus items C and E.
It's been moved by, the agenda has been moved by consent agenda by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. We are now at the ordinances on the second reading and public hearings on any matter. The first item is a public hearing for an appeal of denial of Certificate of Appropriateness and Certificate of Hardship by Historic Preservation Commission regarding proposed window replacement at 545 Collier Street, tabled and continued on December 19th, 2023 to February 13th, 2024. And we have Planner Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson for a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. This item is a continuance of an appeal of a decision by the Historic Preservation Commission in accordance with provisions of the Longmont Municipal Code. In particular, this appeal concerns denial of a request by a property owner for a Certificate of Appropriateness, or COA, to replace all of the historic windows in a locally designated historic landmark, as well as the denial of a Certificate of Hardship. 545 Collier Street is a locally designated landmark, and as such, any exterior alterations beyond general maintenance and repair require approval by the Historic Preservation Commission through the COA process. This property was designated as a historic landmark in 1985 and was purchased by the appellant Ms. Wolf in 2021. A 2002 Cultural Resources Survey, which is included with your packet, provides a full description of this property, including its history and architectural elements, and notes that there have been minimal exterior alterations to the building since 1901. Building permit data confirms that this is still the case. So to recap the path of the appeal under consideration, on July 6th, the Historic Preservation Commission denied the appellant's request to replace all of the historic windows in the home, finding that all of the 4 review criteria established in Section 2.56.130 of the Longmont Municipal Code had not been satisfied as required in order to grant a COA. In this case, the Commission determined that criteria 1, 2, and 3 had not been met. Criteria 1 requires that the proposed work meet all applicable design guidelines approved by Council for individual landmark properties. The Secretary of Interior Standards for Historic Preservation are the guiding document for these decisions. These standards are clear that historic features of a building shall be repaired rather than replaced unless they are deteriorated to the point where repair is not feasible. The windows in question are not deteriorated beyond repair. Criteria 2 requires that the proposed work preserves, enhances, or restores and does not damage or destroy the exterior architectural features of the property. Energy efficiency, especially as it relates to temperature regulation in the winter, is the primary driver of this request. Historic preservation professionals on the commission expressed concern that the windows may not be the only cause of temperature regulation problems and that the proposed window replacement may unnecessarily destroy key architectural features of the property. Criteria 3 requires that the proposed work does not adversely affect the special character or historical, architectural, or aesthetic interest or value of the landmark. The proposed replacement windows would match the style of the original windows and are solid wood, which is consistent with the original material. However, there are differences with new windows that will detract from the historic character of the landmark, and it's important to note that once the windows are removed, they're gone for good. Additionally, the proposed replacements, while wood, they are pine, while historic windows are typically made of old-growth wood, which contributes to the longevity. These windows in question are over 120 years old, and they're still quite functional. They could use some maintenance and repair, but they are not deteriorated. Additionally, historic windows were designed in such a way that they can be repaired and that individual elements could be replaced if needed, which is not really the case with modern replacements. But again, the commission voted 4-2 to deny this request, finding that all of the criteria had not been met as required by the code. So the applicant appealed the commission's decision to City Council. Council remanded this application back to the commission at their September 5th meeting with direction to consider hardship. Members of the council asked at this hearing whether staff had considered an energy audit referenced by the appellant. The audit had not been included as part of the application package and therefore could not be reviewed. Following the September 5th appeal hearing, staff requested a copy of the energy audit referenced by the applicant during this appeal hearing for consideration by the commission. The applicant did not provide this documentation until yesterday, despite multiple requests from staff going back to September. So at the remand hearing, the commission again found that criteria 1, 2, and 3 for a certificate of appropriateness had not been satisfied and therefore denied the COA. Because hardship is not a criteria established within the code for a COA, the commission then considered a certificate of hardship separately using the criteria established in section 2.56.160. This section provides that the commission may issue a certificate of hardship to an owner of a designated landmark based on evidence that an economic hardship or other hardship prohibits the owner from complying with one or more of the provisions of the code. The applicant has the burden of proof that a hardship exists under the following criteria: whether compliance with the regulations would result in an economic burden, substantial economic burden, whether the property cannot be reasonably maintained in a manner consistent with the pertinent standards and guidelines, or whether there's no reasonable means of saving the property from deterioration, demolition, or collapse other than the applicant's proposal. While the commission recognizes that the appellant has had high utility bills, the requested energy audit was not provided for evaluation of whether the windows were the primary cause of heat loss. Additionally, there are alternatives to total window replacement that cost far less than total window replacement and have similar energy efficiency benefits, according to information from the U.S. Department of Energy, among other noted sources. Window replacement is almost always the most expensive option, and numerous studies over the years have demonstrated that it has the lowest and longest to realize return on investment when compared to other measures. The commission determined, based on this information and also based on the absence of new information, that the economic hardship criteria had not been met. The commission also denied this certificate of hardship based on the lack of new information and the existence of far less expensive alterations that would achieve these similar energy savings without permanently altering the exterior of the property. A finding could not be made on the second two criteria for hardship because there was not additional information that could be evaluated. So one thing I would like to note is that Longmont is what is called a certified local government, as designated by the State Historic Preservation Office. This status has certain responsibilities and benefits. Historic preservation commissions and CLGs are required to have at least 40% of their seats held by qualified industry professionals. In the case of our commission, we have architects who specialize in historic preservation and restoration. We have the state archaeologist as well as other professionals in the field. So in terms of what it means to be a CLG, there are financial benefits to both the city as well as landmark property owners. One local example is the Callahan House, whose recent restoration work was funded by state grants. And additionally, state and federal tax credits are available for eligible private projects. The Callahan House grant would not have been possible if the city of Longmont were not a certified local government. So I think that's important to point out. And as the slide notes, maintenance of the status requires a number of things, but one of those is following the Secretary of Interior standards when rendering decisions on certificates of appropriateness. So the question before you this evening is whether the Commission was plainly in error in its decision to deny the requested certificates of appropriateness and hardship. The appellant has the burden of demonstrating that the Commission was in error following the procedures and standards established in the code. The Council shall give deference to the Commission's record and decision and apply the applicable review criteria for the subject application. Staff asserts that these decisions are supported by competent evidence, particularly the photos submitted by the appellant that depict windows that are not beyond repair, and the absence of evidence that the windows are the primary cause of heat loss. Additionally, the decision is consistent with the established review criteria for both certificates of appropriateness and hardship. And finally, the Commission is clearly empowered by the code to review and make these decisions regarding certificates of appropriateness and hardship. So finally, Council has 4 options this evening. You can either uphold first you could uphold the Historic Preservation Commission's decisions relating to both the certificates of appropriateness and hardship. You could reverse one or both of the decisions. You could modify either or both decision. And you could remand one or both matters back to the Commission for further consideration. So with that, I'll stand by for questions and turn the floor over to the appellant, Ms. Wolf.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your flexibility in hearing this, as I was not able to be here last time we were scheduled, so I really appreciate that. Thank you for continuing this. Let me pull up my notes, because I will be reading, because I hate speaking in front of people, so, and now it's permanently recorded and on the internet, so we'll see how this goes. So one thing that I did want to address before I start with the statement that I've put together is that there has been significant alteration to the home since 1901. There was a 250 square foot addition built off the back of the home unpermitted in the 1950s. And it's on the west side of the property. It's plainly obvious. So I just wanted to let that stand corrected. So a couple of things. It took me a while to dig this stuff up because this is not my job. I'm in marketing, so I don't do ordinances and laws, and so it took me a little while to dig it up. But here are some things that I think are pertinent that maybe you might like to consider. Under other hardship, and I'd also like to note that the Commission inappropriately applied this standard by implying that both prongs must be met, and not voting on them individually, when in fact the ordinances says only one is required to be met. But under other hardship, it states that it cannot be reasonably maintained in a manner consistent with pertinent architectural standards or guidelines, or no reasonable means of saving the property from deterioration, demolition, or collapse other than the applicant's proposal exists. Okay, and then just a couple of other little points here. I don't even know how to read this. Under Chapter 2.56.010.B.2, okay, sorry about that, of the Longmont Municipal Code, the purpose of the ordinance creating the Historic Preservation Commission is to create a method to inform, but not to limit or constrain the council in the exercise of its legislative discretion in drawing a reasonable balance between private property rights and the public's interest in preserving unique historic character, based on the amount spent so far on the home and the measures that have been suggested to me by the commission, which I'll go into detail about later. That's why I bring up the reasonability aspect of it. I'd also like to note that, in my opinion, the commission exceeded its authority under the Longmont Municipal Code when it adopted the Secretary of Interior standards in the absence of design guidelines for this historic district. And under the same chapter, but 8.2, should I read the whole thing? The whole number? Doesn't matter. 2.56.010.8.2 of the Longmont Municipal Code, the council must observe the will of Longmont citizens as expressed in section 4.3 of the Longmont Municipal Chapter, pursuant to which every act establishing any rule or regulation for the violation of which a penalty is imposed or placing any burden upon or limiting the use of private property shall be by ordinance. By the commission's own admission, no design guidelines have been adopted for this historic neighborhood. Under the Longmont Municipal Code 2.56.020, design guidelines means a document adopted by council regulating alterations to a designated landmark or properties within a designated historic district. The Historic Commission may not implement design guidelines that have not been adopted by council, as this is a violation of both 2.56020 of the code and 4.3 of the city charter. All right, I'm done with the stuff I barely understand. And now I'm just going to tell you about the situation as I see it. I've spent over a year trying to take measures to satisfy this situation and the commission specifically, and over 2 years trying to remedy and improve the temperatures in my home. Due to timing delays from contractors, grant applications, and other challenges, along with implementing commission recommendations that have not improved the situation as of 2 weeks ago. My kids are now going through their third winter in a home without sufficient heat. I've spent $71,000 replacing HVAC, getting energy assessments, installing storm windows, reglazing windows, installing insulation, installing doors to crawl space so that it can, stay insulated. And lots of other things that I kind of did on my own that really don't add to that number, but they do add to the time spent and the energy spent trying to do this the way that it is suggested to me by the commission. But the situation is still not improved. The hardship application requires that the property cannot be reasonably maintained in a manner consistent with pertinent architectural standards and guidelines. It does not require that every possible measure be taken at all costs. How many years does this commission deem reasonable for my kids to continue living in these conditions? 4? 10? I love this house. I intend to stay there. And it could go on in perpetuity. All in hopes of repairing some deteriorated windows, which I think are deteriorated, but apparently that's up for debate, for which this commission has admitted there is an adequate replacement plan. Despite spending large sums of money to comply with the various remedial measures recommended by the commission, the temperature condition in the house is not improved enough to render it reasonably habitable for me and my kids. Sorry, I lost my place because I got emotional. I think it's my judgment that the commission would have our family spend an additional $50,000 on the improvements that they've listed on top of the $1,000 in wood, comparable design, custom windows. That will keep my house warm. They've already stated that it's adequate. This plan is adequate on the record. So is this really drawing a reasonable balance between private property rights and the public's interest in preserving windows? Is it reasonable to make this the only way that I can save my children from living and sleeping in 40-degree temperatures inside my home on the coldest nights. And it's no small thing that due to climate change, temperatures are more extreme now, and they're not turning around. In my opinion, this is not a reasonable solution for a home, and I don't think anyone here would be very happy with living under these conditions either. So that's the basis by which I'd like the council, though the questions were very neatly laid out for you, and the matters to be considered were very precisely worded. I'd like for you to perhaps consider the reasonability of this. I did submit a whole packet of papers yesterday. I didn't really expect for them to factor into any presentations, but it just took me that long to get it all together. Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me make sure I got everything. Oh, and I did want to add one thing. I've been engaging with one of the vendors that is on the new and improved Historic Colorado vendors list. And surprisingly, for the first time, I got a reaction. I got a call back. It was actually the recommendation from the chairman of the commission, so I imagine the referral went some way. And I had them in my home yesterday and talked at great length with Terry Schmidt at, I will find the name of the company. It is on that list, but it's not readily available. I'm not going to make you stand around and watch me look through my email. And he said that storm windows and operation ability repair are a good step in the right direction, and they will approach the efficiency of double pane windows, but they will never be the same. They will never be the same. And that's from a historic preservation professional from a company that has been doing this for 25 years. So that's it. That's all I've got. Should I sit for questions and come up if you have any?
Let me open this up to council first and
Okay.
to see if they have any questions or comments. Remembering can you bring up that last slide that you had as to the 4 decisions that we need to make? One of them. So I'll open up to council for discussion. Councilor Christ.
Did Terry Schmidt mention whether the windows were repairable?
They are, yeah.
Okay. Have they ever been operable?
No, not since I lived there, and especially not now because I've caulked them all because I was desperate. It was cold.
And can he repair them to the point of being operable?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's see. Somewhere in the package you mentioned that there was the prior owners had baseboard heat and also standalone heaters in each room.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that seems to indicate that they were also having trouble maintaining a temperature in the house.
Yeah, that's how it appeared to me. But that's just an observation on my part. But yeah.
Okay. And you got some help from Efficiency Works?
Yes. Yeah, I did.
Did you have to qualify for that?
I did. Yes.
So you're
Under 80% AMI for the
Okay.
county.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Does anyone else have some add-on questions?
Councilor Martin.
Yes, this is just a logistical question. I have also lived in a house of comparable age that first tried to have baseboard heating. And so I do know that it doesn't work for an old house with high ceilings and stuff. And so, but you have already replaced that with a forced air gas furnace?
Yeah,
Is
I
that-
have 2 actually. I have one upstairs and one downstairs. They run at full capacity all winter, despite the lower temperatures inside.
Okay. The question I have is, I also have had home energy assessments, and when I got a home energy assessment, I got one machine-readable, emailable PDF document.
Mhm.
And so I don't understand why it took many months to provide that document to the commission for review.
Yeah, well, mostly because initially I was under the impression that we were exploring economic hardship. And so what I didn't want to have happen, and this is probably more of an indicator of my deteriorated sense of trust in the commission's judgment, but I didn't want to hand over an unfiltered list of things they could tell me to go do and spend tens of thousands of dollars on before they let me replace the windows. It didn't seem, I tried to take the economic hardship tack. I stated and was willing to provide documentation for the fact that I had qualified for assistance from Efficiency Works, therefore avoiding the need to enter my personal financials into public record forever and ever, but also answering the question of economic hardship. And so why it took that long? Well, one, the reason I just explained, lack of trust and the fact that I thought we were doing an economic hardship hearing, but also when Efficiency Works does an assessment with the intention of doing some of the work themselves and financing that, they do not send you that energy assessment. I've spent more time on the phone than I'd like to admit with the state, questioning the reasonableness or the ethics behind not disclosing the assessment of my own home with me before recommending improvements, but they do not release that information. So I was waiting for that for the resolution to that second situation before I turned anything in.
Okay, I'm confused because I thought initially you said you did receive that.
Do the same assessment again with a few extra questions tacked on. I did not know until literally 3 days ago that I didn't have access to that assessment. I've been kind of chasing people in circles trying to get it. And I just got a straight answer a few days ago.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry if that was unclear. But.
So, you've had 3 assessments done.
Yes, yeah.
Did you give any of them to the commission? They just wanted one.
Yeah, so I don't have the first one. Like I said, I lost track of those details. I don't have the third one because I'm, by law, not allowed. And then, yeah, the second one I delivered yesterday. I apologize for my lateness. I didn't want to give them opportunity to send me home with tons of work to do that may or may not actually improve the situation. They speak with great authority on a home they've never stepped foot in.
So the timeline for that assessment was when, Jennifer?
So the assessment that was delivered to me yesterday, I do have copies if it is this council's prerogative to augment the record. I received it yesterday. It is dated October 2nd, 2023. I first requested it on, I believe, September, I can't recall the exact date right now. It was the week after the first appeal hearing. I asked that it be provided by October 12th so that I could prepare my packet to the commission. Gave some grace. October 23rd, I requested the audit again. Did not receive it. Received a response that I was not that the applicant would not be supplying the audit to staff and to the commission. I will say that one of the primary reasons for requesting the audit actually goes to the question of economics, because there are very cost-effective options out there that will have energy benefits. Plus, the commission, who are professionals and do this work for a living, wanted to be sure that the windows were actually the cause of the problem. In the absence of this audit, they could not determine that the windows were the cause of this problem. And in looking through the audit, It's pretty clear, they say windows and doors are rarely recommended for improvement due to high cost, or for replacement due to high cost. Thermal blinds are recommended. I can tell you I have them myself throughout my house. I have light filtering ones. It is not dark at all, but they are a very cost-effective solution for maintaining thermal regulation. But the issue is the commission could not determine whether window replacement, which is the vast majority of the time the absolute most expensive option for improving a home or for taking care of leaky windows, they couldn't determine if that was really the best approach for helping this particular homeowner make her home weather tight. So it really, the energy audit really does go to the economics question.
So my other question is, you have said, Ms. Wolf, that because the prior owner had space heaters and had some other heating, I guess, solutions that they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So did that ever come up to the Historic Commission with the previous owner? I know that you weren't here, Jennifer,
I
but-
could not find any records of any certificates of appropriateness or anything with the previous owner. One thing to note is that the commission does not get involved with interior renovations or interior improvements unless there is if there are certain tax credits being requested, and typically that's when you get into more of the federal tax credits, and those are for more commercial properties. So that did not come up. It was pointed out by a number of the commissioners that while baseboard heating, from an efficiency standpoint isn't ideal, much like radiator heat in older homes, the way our chair described it is it effectively creates kind of a heat curtain over the windows. So it can keep the house, quite warm, but again, recognizing from a modern standpoint, it may not be the best option. However, there are, historic reasons why that was done. I'd also like to take issue with one comment about there was a contractor that our chair recommended. He didn't recommend them. It was the contractor who did the work on the Callahan house. And it was just hey, they may have time, why don't you give them a call too? Because they are one of the few specialists in historic restoration, and they've actually done work for the city, for city properties before. So there wasn't any sort of quid pro quo. It was strictly hey, I know this group does this work. You should maybe reach out to them in addition to the other folks on this list. And they've always been on the contractor list from History Colorado, from what I recall.
Just as a note there, actually the chairman said on the record that he spoke to the contractors about doing small jobs in reference to my home, and said that he liked to do small jobs between larger jobs.
It was more getting at general availability because the applicant had indicated that there was difficulty finding people to do work. It was not a recommendation, per se.
To me, that isn't an important point.
Yeah.
I mean,
I get it.
It was somebody that restored historical places. And good for you for talking to them. So we have to decide what our recommendation is going to be, and I would like to hear from all of you. Councilor Yarbrough, do you have any input on what you would? Oh, I didn't see it. I guess you do.
Thank you, Mayor. This is, of course, this is not my wheelhouse as far as historic preservation. I do believe that they do have professionals, and that's why there's a commission. And I did want to make sure that you had every opportunity to be able to appeal and see what you could do, anything they could bring to you so that you can accommodate their request so that they can help you in any way possible. I don't understand the part I don't know if there was a fear, like you said, for them to ask more money, that they will be asking you to do more things with the property. But at the same time, if they needed that information, you you were going to come back to us anyway. So we could have heard your, just like we're listening to you now. It is important for you to follow and submit whatever it is that they're asking for so that we can make a really sound decision, making sure you followed everything that they asked you and provided everything that they needed to make a solid decision. And so for me, I have a hard time I can't really go against them with anything because they were waiting on that information for you to see if there was an economic hardship. Jennifer, now that you have that information, have you reviewed it and looking to see if there was an economic hardship?
So I did read through the energy assessment that was submitted, that was conducted in October, and it's pretty clear. They don't recommend replacing windows because they're so expensive. And in the quote that was submitted by the applicant, it was a $43,000 quote. When you layer different options that are less expensive, say you do the thermal shades, you do the storm windows, you do some heavier curtains, you will get, and also the biggest thing the energy assessment stated was that the need to do insulation in the house and to seal air cracks, and as being the biggest bang for the buck projects to do, which confirmed a lot of what the commission suspected and what their initial thoughts were, and that's why they wanted to see this information, because they wanted documentation that the windows were the problem. The windows may be a problem, but they aren't the only problem, and there are steps that can be taken to mitigate them.
So what is your recommendation? Or should we go through? Counselor?
Yeah, I would like to hear from those who are on the commission, and probably if Counselor Rodriguez would want to, you were on there previously, so I would like to hear from you. If you want to, if not, that's fine. Because this is for me, it's kind of hard because when they are asking for information and the information wasn't provided in a timely manner, I think it's hard for them to make a decision. And for us because originally I would say number 4, just so that the whole commission can go over what she brought to you and then make the decision, but I don't want it to be a lot of back and forth if you keep requesting things and you're not receiving it in a timely manner. So that's my concern, but I would like to hear from everyone else.
Okay. Counselor Rodriguez, do you have any options? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you again. Counselor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, having been on planning and zoning before and been on both my wife and I both served at different times on the Historic Preservation Commission, there are some obviously serious issues around, when we go about having buildings placed on the historic registry, and we don't take those sort of things lightly. Those folks that are serving on that, some are somewhat amateurs like myself, and others are CU professors and others like that who have had years of experience and really know, the in-depth intricacies of the historic preservation, and when we to Councilor Yarborough's point, when we ask, it's really important to get that so that we can move forward with it. And I think people want to be reasonable, but the thing is that, again, to Councilor Yarborough's point, the back and forth is concerning. I just think that when people purchase these homes with that identifier on their deed, this is something that maybe the house seems like too good to be true. It's beautiful. It's got a historic element to it. It's got all these cool, unique, historic aspects that are just not put into homes today. But, they do, having grown up in an old home that had, windows that didn't always seal right because they were so old, in the old part of town, I can understand that that's a problem. But it's especially, if it's been put on the registry, now we've got a problem with that, and that's why it takes a special sort of situation to get into something like that. It's not easy when to be in our position to feel like we're pushing this down your throat. Nobody wants to do that. But in the other sense, I think everybody would like to make sure that we don't open up a whole can of worms in regards to now people saying, hey, by the way, I have the same situation. These old homes are drafty, and they have poor windows, but there are some serious fixes, like the total replacement, and then there are some fixes that can keep the character, and that's the price of a house that's on the historical registry, that you have to keep it in the similar sort of character. So I think that we're kind of in this circular sort of pattern, and I think we're going to just have to break it. And unfortunately, I think it's not going to be land on your side. I would not like that to be the case, but I don't see how we can keep going in sending it back to the historic preservation and come out with what it looks like is the same results. So I don't know where to go from here other than to deny.
Sure, go ahead, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I think I agree with Councilmember McCoy. The occupant of the home was not compliant with the requests of the commission, and it's kind of telling when the home assessment does not uphold the proposed action that the commission has recommended against. So I think that the only thing that the council can do is uphold their decisions.
Councilor Christ?
Am I still able to respond to things?
Yeah. I'm actually going to ask a few questions. But go ahead.
Sorry. Sorry. So, energy assessment aside, that was an error in judgment. Sorry.
Well, maybe something you could share is why are you going for window replacement rather than supposedly less expensive opportunities? Does it have to do with financing?
Well, so I've done some of the less expensive stuff. I've had the gaps and cracks filled on the outside of the house. I have clear caulked everywhere around the exterior walls at the baseboard, which when they did the blower door test was a big source of air movement. I purchased the Indo windows that the commission suggested. That was $9,000.
And those are the storm windows that cover on the inside.
And it was still in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Did Mr. Schmidt, does he have time to work on your windows? And how much would that cost?
Yeah, they've been really kind and responsive. They do have time, which the timing could not be more bizarre because I spent literally the better part of a year calling and not getting calls back. But yes, they have time. They said that exterior storm windows, which are kind of irrelevant at this point because I bought the Indos, would run about $500 a window, and that was just an eyeball estimate. I have not actually received a hard estimate from them because it was just a couple days ago that I got them to the house. It takes time to get people out. Yeah, and the operationability improvements that the commission suggested, they're available to do the work. I don't know how much it's going to cost. So,
Okay. And that's something that could be financed through a home equity loan?
because
or
it's a permanent fixture
Yeah.
of the home, yeah, the window operation, I imagine. I'm using my logic here and extending it to this, but I think it can be.
Okay. Remind me how many windows you have?
18. All weird sizes.
And Ms. Hewitt, would external storm windows be acceptable? I know that you deal with the exterior architectural features, and those would be acceptable.
Absolutely, they are acceptable. And in speaking with representatives from the State Historic Preservation Office, if we review the proposed storm windows, if they are historically appropriate, there is the potential that Ms. Wolf could potentially get state income tax credits for it. There is a minimum project cost of $5,000, and then there's, I think, a 20 or 25% tax credit that is potentially available, but they would need to be determined to be historically correct or historically appropriate. But we absolutely permit storm windows. They are something that you see historically on historic windows, and they don't interfere with the permanent. They aren't a permanent fixture.
Okay. So this alternative is a possibility. Because what I see is a house that's in good condition. It's been well kept. It seems like a lot of, Ms. Wolf has made a lot of attempts to try some of the solutions you've recommended. So I'm puzzled as to why the two of you can't work together better. And I don't mean you personally. I just mean that it seems like the Historic Preservation Commission could, give advisement, and then the owner could try a few things, and you could work on a solution. So I would tend to be more in favor of number 4, where we could go back for further consideration and maybe see how much you could improve this property to where you're both satisfied. Because these are beautiful windows. They are remarkably in good shape for the age. And when you consider the hails that we have in this area, it's really unique. But they have to have utility as well. So I appreciate both sides of this argument, and I don't like making a decision that chooses one over the other. I guess that's where we probably all sit. And that's my assessment.
And Councilman McCoy, in response to what you said, thank you for your statements, both of you. When I purchased this home, I had a partner who was handy. So I don't have that partner. So so that kind of informs the where we're at now. Unfortunately, with all of the publicity around this, I probably could not sell that house to most people because they'll know that they can't replace the windows even if I wanted to sell it. So, yeah. But I appreciate your unique perspective. Thank you, both of you.
Councilmember Dalcofer, do you have any comments?
So I had been, and I really want to find a way to make this work. And, because, as representatives, we're representatives to the people, not the property.
Yes.
But, so that's my personal perspective. And so, I did have, a hard time kind of wrapping my head around, and you already have heard this multiple times about holding the information. I really would like to see, and it seems like we can be getting close to some kind of resolution between the two of getting the storm windows, if you're willing to.
I have
to go
interior
that-
ones now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then would it have to be exterior? You know, this is not my
Yeah.
area of expertise, so
Yeah,
I'm-
so the interior storm window serves the same purpose as the exterior storm window,
Okay.
except I didn't need to get a permit or ask for anyone's permission. I was able to spend my money as I see fit on my property and
Yes.
try to improve the conditions.
Yeah.
But they've been installed for several weeks now, and
Uh-huh.
the improvement is extremely minimal by a
Okay.
couple degrees.
Okay.
So I kind of, if I improve the operability of the window behind the storm window, we could
Uh-huh.
probably see some improvement, like where the sashes are kind of lopsided. Now, some
Yeah.
of that's due to settling and will
Uh-huh.
require structural changes.
Yeah.
Which is like a snowball effect. But yeah, sorry, that might not have answered your question. But.
So, you know, and then I guess this question then would go to Jennifer. So with the new information received, would the commissioners, you know, come up with either a different set of criteria, different set of recommendations, or be able to have an opportunity to come closer to a resolution?
I'll be honest that, and say I don't know the answer to that question, but based on what I'm seeing, what I see in the energy audit that I received yesterday, a lot of the suggestions in here are suggestions that the commissioners made during the hearings for this project, as far as the interior storm windows, which actually are now eligible for a tax credit, a federal tax credit.
Uh-huh.
Checking on, you know, doing more insulation, doing, making sure your gaps are sealed. They've made quite a number of suggestions, and I don't know that the suggestions would change. Based on the information in the energy audit, which is pretty clear that because of the expense associated with window replacement, they don't recommend it. They recommend doing things that are, I don't want to say incremental, but taken together, they can have quite a big impact.
In regards to the energy assessment, when I had the folks to my house, I hadn't done any of the fixative measures that the commission had suggested. That was back in October. I was still working on getting vendors out and getting the funding lined up with Efficiency Works. I really, really wish I had access to that other assessment, but it is literally against the rules for me to see it, as frustrating as that is. Maybe they'll let you see it. But when the man, Robert White, the assessor, was at my house, I let him know about the situation. I let him know that the windows were a non-starter and that I needed solutions that I could do myself and immediately, because I was staring winter down. This was literally that council meeting where you said winter is coming. Yeah. And so I panicked, and probably that's what informed my fear-based decision in not sharing that information. But I asked them specifically not to talk about the windows. However, if you look at the blower door images, you'll see that the windows are bright red because there's air coming through them. So the other stuff's been done. So.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment here? So, this is frustrating on both parts. But there are conditions when you buy a historically designated home. I'm really concerned about the 3 energy audits that you had done, and it took so long to get them to it. It's basically, I lost it, but at any rate, I don't want to go through that. You did a lot to your home, but I do know that those curtains work because I've got forced air as well in my home. And if I don't pull those curtains down at night or on a very cold day, it doesn't get warm in the house. But they do block it. Number 4, we've already done that. And the commission has shown you some alternatives, how it won't cost as much with the tax credits, et cetera. So I don't see any reason to keep going through that process. It's going to come back the same regardless. That is the process. And until all the recommendations or the most extreme recommendations that they make, like the window coverings, et cetera, are done, you have options. And I don't know what else to say, so I am going to do number one, uphold their certificates of appropriateness and hardship.
May I ask a clarifying question? Maybe,
Sure.
maybe Jennifer has the answer. Do the window coverings do something that interior storm windows don't?
I have no idea.
They're insulation. They're layers of insulation. I can tell you from my own personal experience, much like Mayor Peck, I have them in my own house, and I have both light filtering ones and blackouts, but the light filtering ones let in quite a bit of light, and you can definitely tell a difference on cold days when they're open and they're closed. It's a layer of, it's insulation is what it is, so.
Especially if you get the ones that are double, that have the holes in each, because the radiant heat from the window heats that air within those pockets, and that is a barrier. So I'm going to go with number one. Any other? I need some. I move that we uphold HPC's decision on certificates of appropriateness and hardship. So it's been seconded by Councilor Martin. Any other discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. So that carries 6-1 with Councilor Hidalgo Faring in opposition. Thank you. The second one on our second reading is R 2024-12, a resolution. Pardon? Okay. I'm sorry, I thought it was, all right, we are now on where are we? Yes, we are. Ordinance approving the amendments to the City of Longmont retirement plans. Do we have a?
No presentation.
Okay. So it's a bill for an ordinance amending sections 3.04.885 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting an amended and restated City of Longmont General Employees Retirement Plan. Are there any questions from council on this bill? Seeing none, I'll open it up to the public hearing on 2024-08. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address this? Seeing none, let's, Councilor McCoy.
I move ordinance 2024-08.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Christ. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. The second motion is a bill for ordinance 2024-09, a bill for an ordinance amending section 3.04.885 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting an amendment to the money accumulation pension plan for employees of the City of Longmont. Are there any questions or discussion on council? Seeing none, I will open this up to the public for a public hearing. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing none, let's vote. Make a motion.
I'll move ordinance 2024-09.
It's been moved by Councilor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. 2024-10 is a bill for an ordinance amending Section 3.04.885 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting amendments to the City of Longmont Old Hire Police Pension Plan and Old Hire Fire Pension Plan. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, I would now open the public hearing on 2024-10. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing none, can I have a motion? Councilor Christ?
I move that ordinance 2024-10 be accepted.
It's been moved by Councilor Christ, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. A bill for an ordinance 2024-11 is an ordinance amending Section 3.04.885 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting an amendment to the City of Longmont Police Pension Plan and Trust Agreement. Are there any questions or comments from council on this ordinance or bill? Seeing none, I would like to open it up to the public for a public hearing on 2024-11. Anybody from the public that would like to address this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on 2024-11 and ask for a motion.
I'll move ordinance 2024-11. Second.
It's moved by Councilor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor Christ. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. 2024-12 is a bill for an ordinance amending Section 3.04.885 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting an amendment to the City of Longmont Fire Employees Pension Plan and Trust Agreement. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing on 2024-12. Anybody from the public that would like to address this bill? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on 2024-12 and ask for a motion.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. 2024-13 is a bill for an ordinance authorizing a farmland lease agreement between the City of Longmont and Gary Bogot, the tenant, at 12748 Weld County Road 1. Are there any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I will open it up to the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to address 2024-13? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on 2024-13 and ask for a motion.
I'll move ordinance 2024-13.
It's been moved by Councilor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. 2024-14 is a bill for an ordinance authorizing the City of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brand Municipal Airport Hangar, Parcel H-34C, the premises, to LK Holding Company, LLC, the tenant. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance or bill? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going way too fast. Councilor Martin.
Yes, I am, just want to ask a hangar lease question that I've recently heard some contrarian information about. Does this tenant actually keep an airplane in this hangar?
Good evening, my name is Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planner with the City of Longmont, or Planning Manager with the City of Longmont. And I believe he does have a hangar, or he's selling it to somebody who will own a hangar in this, or own a plane in this hangar, sorry.
Own a plane?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor McCoy.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, the individual here is selling it to somebody that owns a plane?
Correct.
Okay. Just checking to make sure that I heard that.
Yes, sorry, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the queue from councilors. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on 2024-14. Can I have a motion? It was moved by Counselor Christ, seconded by Counselor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. So that is all that we have on the second reading, but we need to go back to the consent agenda. Counselor Martin removed items C and E. Counselor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I approve of electric vehicle parking in general, and I found myself a little bit confused about how the terms of the ordinance would operate in practice, so I just have a question. We have discussion and direction to council about land use in specific making further changing to our parking requirements for new buildings in general. Is this written in such a way that it's going to have to be revisited when the parking requirements change, or not? It's not clear to me how that works. If the parking requirements for new building are relaxed so that less parking is required, is this ordinance going to get out of kilter?
Mayor, Councilmember Martin, that's a good question. So the way the state law reads is that the EV requirement is a function of the actual amount of parking that's provided. So for any new development, however many spaces they do provide, then a subset of those will have to be electric vehicle. And you may recall from the last time that there was a percentage of the amount of infrastructure. There were 4 different levels of infrastructure that would be required for developments of 10 or more units for multifamily developments. And so those percentages won't change regardless of the number of parking spaces provided for those developments that have over 10 parking spaces. So it will remain consistent.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to move an ordinance so that the math didn't work and that you had considered that use case, essentially. All right, in that case, if no one else has any questions, I'll move adoption of item C.
Okay. 2024-17, 9C was moved by Counselor Martin, seconded by Counselor McCoy. Do we have any more discussion by council? Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Counselor Martin, you also pulled E.
Yes, and I have some questions about this one. First, I want to make it clear that this is a resolution, and that this is not a purchase by the city of this equipment, this Rook device, but it's just an agreement that we have access to it.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I would just like to make the point that the reason I'm questioning this is that Longmont is a city that is dedicated to community policing, has been for a long time. We have an approachable and accessible, and I feel successful public safety force that does good in our community. And I'm really proud of that, and I think we all should be. But I do find the contrast between, this ordinance or this resolution about sharing a tank with Douglas County, and maybe it's a little bit of an exaggeration to call it a tank, but it's got treads and it's got a battering ram, and so it's kind of a scary thing. And so there's some irony in having this resolution follow the one about lead and core. So yeah.
And it's not a tank, but we can go into that.
Yeah. It looks like a a cross between a tank and a chest rook. So yeah, whatever it is, it's kind of a scary looking device. First of all, I would wonder, since we're not buying it, how this came up to council. Did Douglas County get this grant and then approach us to be their partner because their grant required that they share it with other municipalities, or
Yes.
how did it happen?
So Douglas County secured a grant, and part of that grant was to make it a regional resource to teams, which involves the MOU. They also don't want to lend that vehicle out without some consideration for replacement if it was damaged. Officers would need to train on it. So when it was used, they would provide a driver and equipment and get it here. But from my personal standpoint, I would hope we would never have to use it. But hope is not a perfect strategy.
Yes.
It's a piece of equipment that in a very extreme life safety measure could save lives, officer lives, civilian lives. And if we need it, it's a tool that would be available to us.
How long do you anticipate that it will take in the case of a need for it? How long does it take to get it from Douglas County up to
Probably
Longmont?
about 2 hours. We've used a similar vehicle on 2 occasions in Longmont, once during the Residence Inn, when we had to access the 3rd floor where the person blew up the hotel room. And then another one was where a person had threatened his neighbors with an AR-15 style rifle. It turned out to be a paint gun in the end, but we didn't know it. He barricaded it in his house. We used that same vehicle. It's called, it essentially has a ladder on top of a truck that can lift you up to the 3rd floor with ballistic protection. That would be those similar examples, and that's probably over 5 years. And
Okay.
so for operational planning, I think it would be very rare when we would consider it. It would have to be, we evaluate all our warrant service based on the risk. So it would be a very high-risk kind of scenario where we would anticipate needing that. And I at this point, we have other resources. We have, the Bearcat that we share with Boulder County, which is armored. So we have some of those tools available to us. Larimer County has some that we can borrow, and we also share those resources regularly with other agencies.
Okay. There is a concern that having military grade equipment in a police force tends to change the image and perhaps the behavior of the public safety organization, and that's my concern that I just wanted to bring up. There is a federal program for getting military surplus equipment and providing that surplus equipment to the public safety force. This is not part of that program, and I want to make that clear.
That's correct.
But what kind of equipment in the past has Longmont obtained, and how do you have now through that federal program?
And I don't remember when we brought it to you, but we lease night vision goggles from the Navy, and then we have a small robot. They call it a ground drone, but it's a small robot. Again, when we go on these operations, the last thing we want to do is go into that structure. So we have tools available to us, the robots, the drones, our bomb robot, that we explore those locations with tools and pieces of equipment versus people. And this tool is one of those tools that would keep officers safe, keep the community safe if we have to evacuate. But we don't have any military vehicles or military guns. The weapons we purchase are very similar to what any citizen can buy. Our officers have handguns, and then they can purchase their own rifles.
Sure, and I wanted to make that point. And the bomb robot actually moves a suspected explosive device away without an officer having to approach it? Is that what
Right.
it does?
We can use it for that, and we do use it for that,
Mhm.
but we also use it to search the house. So rather than send a person in, we drive the robot into the house.
Mhm.
It can climb stairs, it can open doors, and we can communicate through that robot. We'll also break windows, fly the drone into the house and search the house. We try to clear as much as we can without putting people at risk in that structure.
Okay, good story. I like that. I wanted to make it clear. And given that, if nobody else has any questions, I will move approval of the resolution.
Thank you.
So Resolution 9ER 2024-11 was moved by Counselor Martin, seconded by Counselor McCoy. Any more discussion? I do.
Yes.
I'm curious, are we the only municipality that's going to have an MOU with Douglas County to use this?
I don't know how many people they've reached out. They've reached out to all the SWAT teams kind of work together, so they reached out to a lot of different departments, so we're not the only one.
Okay, that's what I
I'm
wanted.
sure Castle Rock and many of those
The
agencies.
closer ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So let's vote. That passes unanimously, thank you. And let's take a 5-minute break.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Yeah. We don't want to be scary.
Now we're going to move on to general business. The first thing on general business is a bill for an ordinance, 2024-18. Susie? Counselor Hidalgo Faring, we are waiting. Hello? It's a bill for an ordinance authorizing approval of the Longmont Planning Area Comprehensive Plan.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Glenn Van Den Wegen, Planning and Development Services Director, and give you a little bit of short history on the property. We did make a presentation on 2 agreements that we have with Boulder County regarding our planning area. One is the one you're reviewing tonight, which is specifically between Boulder County and the city of Longmont. And then there was the super IGA that we presented back on May 3rd. What your direction to us was to continue to negotiate to update those 2 agreements. They had at that point a drop dead date of October 16th, 2023. You gave us direction to work with staff and address and also include something regarding affordable housing in that agreement. So we've done that. We've worked with, it's Hannah Hipley, who's the planning manager at Boulder County, and with a team of staff members here with the city of Longmont. And we have for you a completely new agreement because both those agreements did expire last October. And I think what our joint staffs realize is that agreement was originally done in 1997. It needed an overhaul. So you're going to see a completely new agreement this evening. And then ultimately you will see that super IGA. The county wants to get other communities that are in Boulder County to buy into the one-on-one agreement between them, and then they'll bring the big umbrella agreement to you in the future. So the basic tenet of this agreement is to keep the county rural and as open space agricultural uses, kind of define Longmont by that green border around the community, but at the same time support our growth inside our planning area. So that's what the agreement has. We support growth in the city planning areas through defining where the county can buy open space, where the city can buy open space, and then how we permit building infrastructure that supports our community in Boulder County. I showed this to you back in May. This is supported by Envision Longmont that talks about the urban design of surrounding the community by open spaces so that we do appear as a freestanding community, and that it's to the benefit of our residents to have agricultural uses maintained in Boulder County on our perimeter. I want to talk about the 2 exhibits and all the geographic terms that are in your agreement with a bunch of acronyms. So I might use a more common term for some of these things, but one of them is the city itself, which is areas that have been annexed that we provide services to. That's all the gray areas in these 2 maps. We have the Longmont annexation boundary, which is that purple line that surrounds our planning area in Boulder County. And again, this is right out of Envision Longmont. There's not a different line here than what's in our comprehensive plan. Potential annexation areas are those white areas that have not been annexed yet, shown on the map between within the planning area boundary. And then the rural preservation area, which is really what the county is concerned about, is all the area outside that purple line, which is under Boulder County control and will stay that way unless there's a separate agreement. And then we added something new with this agreement, and that is the coordinated planning area. Again, it comes right out of Envision Longmont. That's the map on the left. That's the area that's actually out of Boulder County, where we have separate agreements with Firestone and Meade and Weld County on what happens there. But the county does purchase open space outside the county. In fact, in our staff report, we gave you a example of a joint agreement where we purchased the Pichelle open space in Weld County. And basically, we have some provisions now in Weld County in our Boulder County agreement. So that's pretty clear, I'm sure. So a couple of the requirements regarding annexation. The city will only annex those areas within our planning area that haven't been annexed yet. We won't annex outside our planning area boundary unless we happen to have a compelling reason and the county agrees and we come back and we amend this agreement. But generally, our annexations are limited to within our planning area, areas that are county islands that haven't been annexed yet. We notify the county promptly when somebody does propose annexation and show them what's being proposed. Really, the only reason they look at it is it in conformance with this agreement? We can't expand those annexation areas, which means we can't annex out into the county beyond that planning area boundary. But again, we do have a provision that by mutual agreement, we can amend these provisions in the agreement. And then open space purchases. This agreement says Boulder County will not purchase open space in any of those annexation areas, any of those county islands that's with our planning area. They won't purchase open space in our Longmont annexation boundary, that purple line. The county will not grab open space or purchase open space within there. And then we added our coordinated planning area as well, that portion of the area in Weld County. However, Longmont can purchase open space in any of those areas, so it does not tie Longmont's hands. And then we have a few other provisions. One regarding, there is a permitting process for through Boulder County that is rather extensive for any kind of infrastructure. But because we are part of this agreement, basically the county says what Longmont is doing as far as infrastructure meets our comp plan. Therefore, it's a bit of a streamlined process. And I mentioned in the agreement that the Nelson Flanders plant is definitely going to be a candidate for some additional expansion permitting. So this is part of the agreement that actually goes back to 1997, and we're extending it forward into this agreement. We provided a new chapter about, or a section about housing affordability being a regional concern. I think the county folks feel that we do have a regional housing partnership with Longmont and a lot of the communities in Boulder County, but if we need to emphasize that, they felt that was a good provision. So I think we're open to other ideas at this point, but I think from staff standpoint, I think we're doing something a bit more, certainly was silent on it with the previous agreement. The county folks told me that this does add a lot of strength because other communities will be buying in with similar requirements. So more the merrier, and I think we have a better chance of making sure this is a regional issue and everybody is sharing in the solution as far as providing affordable housing. We added a section about the sugar factory. We've talked about recently the redevelopment of the sugar factory area. It's going to be an important redevelopment area for us. At the time we drafted this agreement, potentially we thought, well, we may want to clean it up before it's annexed. So again, we would be beholden to Boulder County to help us issue permits, and that could be small grading, demolition permits, but they've agreed that they would, that we have a joint interest in seeing something else happen on the sugar factory site, and they'll help expedite those permits. One of the things the county staff added is they realized that we're burdened by some non-conforming uses that are in those county islands, in those future annexation areas, and they're really industrial areas that are uses over and above what Envision Longmont envisioned. So they offered up the fact that they'll evaluate their zoning and potentially look at rezoning some of these areas to be in conformance with Longmont's Envision Longmont, our comprehensive plan. So I think that's a pretty big step, and I think they are doing this in some of the other communities. Lyons, I think, is one of them, that they're actually taking steps to zone non-conforming uses to be conforming with that city's comprehensive plan. So a pretty big step there. And then on top of that, I think this is really a repeat, is that Longmont would strive to annex those areas, those enclaves or county islands that are within our planning area. And I think that's basically it. We've been presumptuous, hoping that you could approve this on first reading. But we certainly would offer steps between 1 and 2 if you would like it come back for first reading and second reading. But we are recommending and hoping you approve this on first reading, and it'll come back for a public hearing on the 27th, I believe. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that council might have.
Councilor Martin.
Yes, there are some things about Envision Longmont that are a little bit behind the curve in terms of urban development policy as it stands today. This is a kind of peripheral to the issue at hand, but is there an update to Envision Longmont in its near future?
Well, technically, the transportation plan is an update,
Mm-hmm.
at least the transportation element of Envision Longmont. So that's going through now. We really wanted the community to focus on that, so we are tentatively talking about closer to the end of the year, starting the overall land use part
Okay.
of modifying Envision Longmont.
Well, that's a pretty near future. That's near enough for me. And the other question I had is Boulder County aligned with our intention to annex the enclaves?
They
encourage it?
They do encourage it, and that ultimately is the ultimate answer as far as these
Yeah.
non-conforming uses.
Okay, thank you. Those are the only questions I have about it.
I would say in terms of Envision Longmont, we did have the conversation about doing it sooner, but with staff capacity, that was an issue that we were struggling with. So on target at end of the year, if we have significant staffing challenges, we'll definitely be talking to council about capacity to do it. But at this point, I think we're on pace.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. There are going to be some folks out there that are watching that kind of want to know if in these if you're referring to enclaves as like areas like the Kanemoto Conservation Easement, is that considered an enclave? Just making sure that the public is aware of that.
Yes, it's one of those. It is definitely one of those areas that's within our planning area yet to be annexed.
Okay, and then on the maps there, just for the general public's education, are we seeing that in that purple outline map?
Yeah, I can jump back. Wish I could point at it, but you can see where the diagonal highway comes up and
Right, I see there on airport and diagonal highways in red, airports on the left for those that can't.
Yeah.
And it's just that
Basically
area
where
there.
the pointer is. Right.
It doesn't lock us into anything, it's just a kind of a general guideline of.
That's correct.
All right, I'm just making sure that folks that are watching are, up to speed, so they don't assume we're just doing this at 9 o'clock at night and the.
Correct, and there's a full process for the annexation and zoning that has to go through numerous public hearings, so, no, it doesn't happen overnight.
All right, thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Sure.
So I have a couple of questions. You mentioned the open space in Weld County?
Yes.
And that the distal and toll properties in Weld County, can we annex those? Or, because they're not in Boulder County, I don't know what the Weld County, and I know you touched on it.
Well, there's nothing in this agreement that would keep us from annexing the areas in Weld County. We do have a separate agreement with
Right.
Weld County. So I think, David, maybe,
I could, that's okay.
Okay.
Glenn, I can find that out. I was just wanted that answer.
okay, there's nothing in this agreement that would keep us from annexing those
Okay.
areas or purchasing those areas.
And I would like your definition of an enclave. When we, this goes to a past conversation that I had. When you say the enclaves within our city that are actually Boulder County properties, when you say annex the enclave,
Perhaps a more accurate term would be, that'd be maybe more universal, as a county island.
Okay.
And when you think about an enclave, it's completely surrounded by Longmont. But as you can see, not all these areas are completely surrounded by Longmont. There's some on the edges, Kanemoto being one of them, that is not completely surrounded by Longmont. So I would say anything that is a county, I call them islands, within that purple boundary, you could call enclave. Now, I think there's a legal term regarding different annexation processes. If a property is completely surrounded, I'm not exactly sure about those nuances, though.
oh, nice, nice dodge there.
We do have experts here.
So, our council said, and I can't know it verbatim, the ordinance, that we won't annex unless they are asked to be annexed. Am I stating that correctly?
There was a policy direction to not force annex.
Not to force annex. Do you think when we annex an enclave that the definition of annexing an island would be the entire island or just a portion of it? This goes to, or a parcel of it.
Yeah, I think chipping away even incrementally, I think meets what the goal of this agreement is, Mayor.
Okay.
And if you have a policy that says the owner has to sign on, then that's the policy we follow.
Okay. I guess Aaron's correct. It's hard for me to say. Thank you. Seeing no other questions, can I have a motion as to adopting?
I move ordinance 2024-18.
Great. Councilor Rodriguez moved 2024-18, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Now we are at B, which is, I need to expand this to read it here. Oh, your time's up, Glenn. So the next one is a proposed ordinance amending section 13.20.050, public lands regulations, and adding section 13.2.110. And I see David Bell at the podium.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. David Bell, Director of Parks and Natural Resources. In your packet this evening, you have the proposed amendments to Chapter 13. There's a few there, but I think there's enough information in the actual ordinances, and then we tried to do a pretty good summary on the front of that. So we don't have a prepared presentation. We've done that presentation with PRAB. We've gone through that. We've taken their advice and guidance. We've made some changes. So tonight I have with me some staff. I have Elizabeth Lorraine Mills, Senior Assistant City Attorney, Bryce Oubre, who is our Senior Ranger at Parks and Open Space, and then Chelsea is going to be our Senior Ranger out at Union Reservoir. So what we really want to do tonight is make sure that if you have questions, you can ask of us. We do have something we pull up and look at it together, but this is a zero reading, so this gives you the chance to make some comments, gives us a chance to take it back, and then it will come back on a first reading after that.
So it looks more like it's a cleanup type of bill.
It really is at this point.
Yeah.
There's a few, I would say there's one in there for sure. I think that's going to be, that Liz will be able to talk about more. And it's probably the
penalty sections, I think, is a significant change. And the
Okay.
idea is to, incarceration would not be an option for a lot of these parks violations. They would move to a fine, similar to how the state does it. And so that would be the real substantive change that I think council should be aware of.
Okay.
I appreciate that. And that really does, again, help our rangers out in the park. A lot of times they're meeting with people and they have a lower level violation. At the current situation, that goes to court and the judge decides what's happened. So there's a lot of uncertainty with this. This way, if someone's out there, they have a dog off leash or fishing violations, the ranger can make that contact or the officer can make that contact, and here's the violation and here's what you're being charged for. You can either pay that or then it is your choice if you do want to go to court. But it makes a whole lot more certainty in the field as we're trying to enforce these lower level rules and regulations.
I like that. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Can you address the issue around Amendment 5 that we had the conversation at PRAB about? It was kind of I can give us kind of a bit of the flavor of that.
We'll go ahead and, Bryce, you want to sit up here and pull up your PowerPoint and we can pull that one up so we can take a look at that together and we'll talk through that.
Yeah.
Is this the right one?
Yep.
Okay.
Just our conversation when we were talking about how we wanted to be careful about what we were talking about with, like, sometimes people would want to spread the ashes of their loved ones.
Oh.
I got you. It would be this one.
Okay, sorry.
Yep, so this new ordinance would be for, like you said, like spreading ashes, depositing personal property, things we don't want to call trash. Right now, that would fall under trash, and that's can be disrespectful to certain items that are left behind. So by saying deposit, store, or install items of personal property, we're not calling these items trash, but we're also protecting the public lands.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted the general public that didn't attend PRAB or watch the video or that see this understand that nuance there, because that's kind of the flavor of our conversation there as the group, and I thought that was really great that you made those distinctions, because you can probably tell that the council, that people are doing this, out of the best intentions, but probably not very health conscious for the community as a whole.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Do we have any other discussion or questions from council? Okay, Councilor Christ.
I have a concern about fines. I know that the public is responsible for understanding ordinances, but it is actually a large body of work, ordinances for the city. And so I have a schoolmate that is a park ranger and has served for probably 25 years. And at one time they imposed fines. And he said it was really just a mess. You know, first everybody wanted the fines, then everybody complained about the fines. And the thing is, you have a lot of choice when it comes to recreation in the state of Colorado. So then the businesses were concerned that it was driving away tourism. And so then it came back against the rangers, actually, that people that were giving too many fines were let go from their ranger duties. And so it just became a circle of disquiet, if you will. And I'm concerned. I'm concerned about fines because the public has come to us many times saying, you know, they're upset about taxes. They feel like there's a heavy burden right now in terms of cost of living, and you know, taxes on. You know, we had maybe 8 people come and talk to us about taxes about groceries. I think they would perceive this as yet another tax. And something that my friend mentioned is the thing is, you can never have enough signs in open space. So there's always somebody who didn't see the sign who's going to argue this with the judge. They found in the very end that every ticket they were giving was actually costing the city, and he's worked for a couple of different cities, at least $1,000. So they were never making back the effort that they were putting out. So eventually they just decided that it was more of a, where he is now, more of a how to interact with nature in a way that's safe for humans and preserves the natural elements. And that interaction, that kind of engagement has been more positive. So I would like to see less penalties and more engagement, at least at this time. And I guess maybe what I would like to see you come back with is if you could do some studies of cities in the area and what they might be doing. Because I understand, you know, when we're talking about storing property and what have you on public lands and camping, I know we're in a kind of different situation than we've been in the past. So I just would like to know what other cities are doing, have some consistency in the region, because we will be competing with them for participation in nature and beautiful environments. Go ahead.
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Christ, David Belligan, and again, I think I hear what you're saying. I think that's one of the reasons the Rangers brought this forward, really, because right now this is going to court, is taking the judge's time. There's uncertainty. That fine can be fairly steep. It can be less. It can have jail time with it. So what this is really doing is trying to get down to a known quantity for a violation. With our ranger group, I have worked as a ranger with Boulder County. Price and Chelsea have worked with Aurora, and Price up at Button Rock has worked with City of Boulder and Pitkin County. So we looked at all of those different agencies, trying to make sure that we were consistent with that, and that we were trying to put a little bit of teeth into rules and reg violations where we don't think that education piece is working for us. And Bryce can talk a little bit about the numbers we keep and how many warnings and educational contacts we make versus how many tickets we're actually writing. So I do hear you saying that was really one of the driving forces of this. How can we be more equitable with our community? How can we make it easier for rangers to have contacts? But it's still, how do we have the ability to make people recognize that if you're hunting on open space, if you're harassing wildlife on open space, if you're damaging your property, that some of those things do have consequences. And if you don't mind, if Bryce, you could talk about some of the numbers you collected this year with your contacts.
So I thought you said it beautifully about what rangers are trying to do. We're educators, not enforcers. Mm-hmm. Like Dave was saying, our contacts last year, I think 97 enforcement contacts last year, 97% resulted in a warning or just education, and 3% made it to the full summons portion. So basically, the way that we work as educators, giving people the benefit of the doubt, first warnings, second warnings, if you're getting to the point where we're writing you a $100, $200 ticket, you've been warned multiple times and you're just disregarding the rules at this point. So even if you miss the sign, then I'm the sign now. I will speak to you. I will kind of relay what the rule is, why the rule exists, how it's protecting the resource, and give you that benefit of the doubt. It had to be a very extreme circumstance of why I'm writing you a ticket first time I ever talked to you. So we like to be educators. We like to have that discretion. We trust that people that are in open space and public lands are trying to do the right thing, and maybe it's just ignorance of the rule or not understanding how their actions are affecting the resource, and that's what we're here for. So we're not going around handing out $100 tickets every day. I think we wrote maybe 12 last year out of thousands of contacts. So it's in the very extreme, rare occurrence where our education and our warnings are going unlistened to, and we're kind of left with this is our final way to get people to follow the rules. But ideally, this is an extreme circumstance, and I don't like writing tickets. It makes for bad contacts. I'd rather be the friendly park ranger and kind of explain why the rules are the rules and get people to engage in why we're protecting this resource.
Out of the 12 tickets that you wrote, were they successful? Did you get fines?
Yeah, they all went to court because they were court summons, and then they were prosecuted in court.
Yeah, and they ended up paying the fines, because that was the other thing that came up in our conversation is then sometimes the fines don't get paid, and then, you're trying to collect that.
I never hear back from the courts on what the final result is on did they pay the fine, or they delinquent, did they get a warrant for failure to appear. I really don't get that feedback unless I'm summoned to court to testify. But to the best of my knowledge, most of them are paid, but that would be a guess. I'm not sure how many FDA'd or didn't pay.
Okay. And what would you say are your main concerns in terms of violations?
For like a ticketable offense?
Mm-hmm.
See, most of them are dog off leash when I've talked to them 2, 3, 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
Every ranger might have one or two that it's just a ticket first offense, like child without life jacket. If I contact a parent and their child's on the water without a life jacket, could I give them a warning? Yes, but that's a serious offense in my book, so I go ahead and write the ticket and let them know how serious that is.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. In general, it sounds like you have a lot of discretion about whether you write a ticket or not. And I just want to ask a question to talk about how important that is. If somebody that is doing something like your child without a life jacket is a great example, or using a powered water vehicle where it's not appropriate,
Sure.
Those things. Fines for those things are great because they are a deterrent to the people that are going to incur those violations. I see a lot of fires in certain places, and there may be some about camping. There's a class of violations that are more likely and more able to be committed by indigents in the open space. And my concern is that fines are not really meaningful as a deterrent to an indigent, because they never have any money and they're never going to pay them. But they can become a stack of overdue fines can become a deterrent when that person finally comes in from the cold and wants to enter coordinated entry or some other program that will help them become housed, and then they've got these pending fines. So are you aware of, or are your rangers aware of using their discretion and not fining people in that classification so that that bad outcome doesn't happen or is less likely to happen?
Councilmember Martin, David Bell, I just want to start this one. Bryce could answer this one perfectly, but as the person that kind of thinks sets the tone for this, I want you to know what a great group of rangers they have out there, and their first piece is that education, but also providing information on services that the city provides. That's the first contact they have when someone's out there and they're experiencing homelessness, is what do you need first? How can we help you get to that? They work in conjunction with other city services to provide that. They call them in as backup or support when they're making those contacts. But again, sometimes those always can progress, but we're doing that in a very methodical process as we're working with our other agencies in-house here. But I want to set that as a tone of this group, that again, our first piece with people who are in that situation is we're trying to help them access the services they need, but then at some point we have to make sure that they're also responsible for activities. And we've had fires out on open space properties in our parks because of people having that, because they weren't taking advantage of those services. I'm just going to share a piece too. When these nights are cold and stuff, Bryce has been out there with hot chocolate trying to get people to take services. So that's the kind of rangers you have out there. So so I'll let you guys
that's good to
walk
know.
down, and if you want to add anything else, Liz or Bryce.
You're 100% correct that what's more likely to get someone to engage with outreach, a $100 ticket or getting,
Hot chocolate.
Yeah, or getting like risk management and harm reduction involved. That's that's much more effective than adding to their rap sheet or giving them a warrant that it's not helping anyone. So yeah, we'll do a lot of public outreach, resource referrals. If it gets to the point where we have to write a ticket, then, I mean, at some point I might have to go that route. But like David said, as rangers, I feel like we're good people. We care about other people, and we do a good job of taking that discretion. We're trying to use the least enforcement necessary to get the job done. So if a simple talking and offering resources to get the job done, then why am I writing a summons? That's overkill. So.
Sure. So you do then carry materials that you can give away, information that people can use to access services.
Absolutely.
Because I had heard this said in the past, and I just wanted to make it public that it's still true, that you're still doing this. One other question is, do you feel like the rangers, after a while, get to know the people who are in and around Longmont and in that situation? You know who they are?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's good to know, too. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions in the queue, I am going to move to direct staff to bring back the ordinance as presented. All right. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, I move the, let's see, it was ordinance 13.20.050, and it was seconded by Councilor McCoy.
I think I messed up. Sorry, that was
Yeah,
me.
you just need to direct
Apologies.
us to bring us back. This is first reading, or this is zero reading, so
Oh,
you
it's
just
not,
direct
it's
us
just
to bring
a-
it back. And then
That's
we'll-
right, that was the amended section.
Yep.
So bring it back.
Yes,
Let's
ma'am.
vote.
Thank you, Council.
Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next thing on our agenda is the 2024 legislation bills recommended.
Mayor Peck, members of City Council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. We actually only have one bill today because Matt just let me know that the pet animal licensing has postponed indefinitely, so there you go. So the only bill that we're discussing today is House Bill 24-1098. This is a tough bill, and I certainly recognize the support that we heard during public invited to be heard. It feels to me like it's very well-meaning and really trying to help people to stay in housing. But there's some things that actually discourage housing that are also part of it. So let me kind of go through it and let you know the analysis, and then of course it's your choice. So this bill, House Bill 1098, concerning protections for residential tenants and requiring cause for the eviction of a residential tenant, really is, as I said, I think it's well-meaning. But some of the details create less fair and affordable housing. For example, the bill would effectively mandate the minimum 90-day leases and eliminate the feasibility of month-to-month leases due to the non-renewal noticing requirements. For anyone who's needed that kind of flexibility, month-to-month renting is certainly a really good option. The bill would also only allow renewal of a lease in certain circumstances and would require the landlord to pay for relocation benefits for a non-renewal of a lease outside of the allowable circumstances, and it gives a list of what those look like. Sometimes non-renewal of a lease is a less impactful way to settle issues with tenants with behavioral issues that cause problems for neighbors. If the bill passes, the only option to address behavioral issues is eviction, which is a costly route to take for the landlord and the tenant, may pit neighbor against neighbor in court, and the record of eviction may impact the long-term viability of tenancy. Additionally, if a 12-month lease means that the landlord would also be subject to paying for 3 months of relocation expenses, there's a concern that landlords will just increase their rents to be able to cover that risk of the higher risk of renting. Without the ability of landlords to set predictable lease terms, the prospects of renting overall may turn off some landlords to wanting to rent in the first place, would hurt the housing market for low-income households. The Colorado statutes already prohibit renewal for certain reasons, including fair housing laws and protected classes. Obviously, affordable housing is a priority to the City Council. While the bill is well-meaning, there certainly are some big impacts that might be caused. And so the staff recommends City Council oppose 24-1098.
Councilor McCoy.
So, Sandy, in this situation here, if a landlord has been identified for not doing certain things, and with the city or the state or whatnot, then they have to apply cause. Am I correct in understanding that? That they have to, if they're going to let somebody go at the end of their lease, if they've been neglectful about, fixing a leak or some other thing, or, a faulty electricity or something like that, and they haven't fixed it, and then they had, the tenant had to bring it to like our housing authority or some group like that handles that type of thing. Would that be, then would they have to prove cause in that situation?
There are certainly some pieces that really make sure that you can't do non-renewal for fair housing laws for protected classes. In that particular situation, I guess it's kind of complicated, because if they were using a Section 8 voucher, there are requirements that go along with that, that would require the landlord to give particular sets of cause. I think what this bill is trying to do is to make sure that landlords aren't just kicking people out with no real reason, right? And that's very well-meaning and a good idea.
Right.
But at the same time, I think some of the downsides of it, create more problems. To answer your question specifically, I'm not sure that they would have.
I think if they
let's say it's not a Section 8 voucher.
Yeah, if they get cited for something, they have to then. My understanding, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, and maybe somebody can tell me differently, but that if you're at that stage where you've had repetitive things where you had to go and get, city or county or some group like that involved because the landlord's not being responsive, then when they go to, finalize the lease with that individual, they have to give cause, but maybe
So I think what this legislation is really, if you're the landlord and you're going to terminate the lease, in terms of terminating the lease to the leasee, it's about cause. And so it's a little bit different than the tenant having an issue with the landlord, because then that will fall under, does something fall under fair housing? Does it fall under habitability standards? That's sort of the reverse coming in. This is really about the landlords and the actions that they take with individuals.
Right, it's just not having to give cause. Most landlords, if they haven't been cited for that, and they fixed it, but they feel like the tenant has been really, the squeaky wheel about stuff, they haven't involved some other entity into it. But they are always, oh, this needs painting, that needs changing, that needs fixing. Then the landlord says, at the end of their 12-month lease, I don't have to give you cause to do that, and that's what this indicates. But if the landlord, what I was asking is if the landlord has been cited and it has been brought to the attention of like a housing authority or some sort of thing like that, not being Section 8 vouchers or anything like that, somebody try to force the landlord to actually fix things that they should have fixed a while ago in a prompt sort of way according to their lease, then they have to give cause of why they're letting breaking the lease or changing the lease or not extending the lease to month to month.
Yeah, I would assume that that's a fair housing issue. I mean, the way that you're describing it, so you're saying that the landlord didn't do their end of the bargain and then at the
So I
end
think what I'm
non-renewed
saying-
because they got reported. That, in my mind, would be a fair housing issue.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is I think it already exists in those types of situations. It's just for the ones where we don't have any of that evidence to suggest that.
This actually came up today in your Housing Authority Advisory Board meeting. And so you have landlords in the group, we had mediation members in the group, and they were pretty concerned about this because within this, while you don't have to give cause, it actually, one of the individuals that is a landlord indicated, well, I don't have to give cause, but I can raise the rent to $6,000 a month. And there's nothing that this legislation fixes in that. So they can essentially price them out in dealing with this. Another thing that came up from the group was, and we talked about this, one of the things that a lot of landlords do when they're working with tenants, whether it's failure to pay or it's significant issues, they actually, part of the process that you go through in terms of eviction court is you go through a mediation process. It is not uncommon for landlords to agree to a termination of the lease instead of going through eviction. And what that does is that eviction then is not on the record of the tenant. On the mediation side, they were incredibly concerned that what it's going to do is push more people to go through the full eviction to deal with the issue. And once an eviction is on somebody's record, it really limits their ability to rent another property. And so that piece was in play. Another thing that they talked about is when they look at this, what they're hearing from, and these are the local landlords, these are the small ones. A lot of them are really now starting to think, do I even stay in this market because of the expense and everything that they have to go through. And so there was some communication to us about people that are selling, that are renting naturally affordable housing, actually starting to look at selling their houses to REITs, which is a real estate investment trust. And then that starts getting managed not at the local level, but at the broader state and national level because of the expenses that were associated with this. And so that then starts changing how all of this comes to bear. And as we had that conversation, the intent's there. I think what everyone was really concerned about with this was really the unintended consequences that will come out of this. And what was really interesting to me is the fact that in listening to that conversation, people are already having that conversation of, well, if I can't do this, then I'm going to do this, or then I'm going to raise the rents. And so all of that is, I think, why we're concerned about really what is the unintended consequence, and at the end of the day, is this going to have more of a negative impact on someone who rents properties because people will start shifting how they approach it. And what was really interesting is I had in that room, there was a landlord on one side talking about it, and there was someone from our mediation program on the other side talking about it, and they were almost saying exactly the same things. One of them said, I rent properties, and a lot of times I don't charge late fees and do these things. I actually say, and I asked her if I could say this, and she said, if you give me some pozole, then I'll waive your late fees. What that's going to do is really limit the landlord's ability to work with their tenants in that way because of the way that this is structured. And I think, and in talking to the person who's on the mediation, what he said he's hearing is that really a lot of the local landowners are really upset because they've been trying to work with people in some cases, and this is almost going to take that ability away from them. Now, we're not experts in this, so I'm just conveying to you what we're hearing and then also what we have as concerns, because I will tell you from the Housing Authority's perspective, if this passes, a lot of times where we mediate settlements and we go the settlement route, we don't have the eviction, it will send us on many of these cases through eviction court to deal with these issues because we will have no other option to deal with it.
Counselor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. This is a lot of meat in here, and I know for me myself. Okay, first question I want to ask. So you're thinking that this would affect the HUD properties and tax credit HUD's okay. So for me myself, I won't support the opposition because I want to get more information because there's a lot in here and it's a little confusing for me. So I myself want to get more information and look up more information for myself so I can understand what I'm voting on, because this is a lot in here and it's kind of like, what, how, what? So for me, everybody else may got it, no problem, but I'm just telling you for myself, being in housing, and I just want to make sure that if someone email me and ask me, why did you oppose that or why did you approve that, I want to be able to give them the correct answer as to why I did what I did. So for me, that's my reasoning.
If I can jump in, that was part of our conversation today.
Mhm.
This is a lot to digest. And I think the clarity that came out of our conversation is, are we truly identifying the unintended consequences? There was, Lisa was part of a update on this legislation today, and I think there's actually going to be a recording of it that we may be able to send to you all.
Oh, good.
Where some attorneys were actually advising the broader rental association in terms of what this really does. I haven't had a chance to see it, but if council definitely wants more time to get more information, what we can do is get that presentation, send it to you. I'm going to watch it to really try to judge some of my assumptions. We know that there's problems with landlords that will take advantage of individuals. That doesn't necessarily mean that every landlord is doing that, and what we're concerned about is those that aren't doing it, it puts them in a different situation that ultimately impacts the overall housing stock. That's the worst fear.
And Mayor Peck, if I could also add that this analysis came from our housing folks. So they looked at it and was like, whoa, this could really create some issues. So, yeah.
Counselor McCoy. Oh, it was. Oh, my gosh, everybody's in the queue now. Counselor Hidalgo Ferry. Whoops.
You just turned me off, yeah.
There you go.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Oh. So, yeah, I agree with Councilmember Yarbrough. It is a lot to digest. As I was going through, even the section on the retaliatory rent increase prohibited, it doesn't really, just even some of that language in there, I don't think it really addresses. So if you're raising rents discriminatory, there is fair housing that addresses that. As well as retaliatory. I just, so I don't know if it really addresses if the landlord cannot evict that person, then the only way that they could do it is by raising their rents. I don't know if that language, the way it's written, would truly address that piece. As I'm looking, I kept rereading it over and over again, and I don't know, maybe I'm just fried, but so there is some trouble. As a renter, my husband, he does plumbing. So we have this relationship with certain landlords that we've had, and especially the ones that we've had good relationship with are the ones who do live in Longmont, who are nearby. And, we're able to have that open conversation. And I'm fearful that some of this would close the doors. And while I totally agree we need to do something about housing. We have to address some of the inequities that are occurring, especially among renters. But does this bill, as written, would it address that? Would it really address some of the larger scale property management companies that aren't even stationed in the state of Colorado? So I still, as I was kind of scrolling up and down and kind of, I'd read it and kind of sit on it for a while. And I think there's more that could be done with this and some things that could be changed. I would really like to have an opportunity well, as well, not just to see a presentation on this, but also find out from the makers of this bill, did they analyze what could be, for this piece of language, what could be a negative impact, looking at all the possible scenarios. So I want to be careful about that. I know there was some compelling testimony about, supporting this, and I don't disagree with the intent, but I'm afraid that the impact might be more negative than what we can, than what's proposed here.
If I can jump into one of your points, one of the things that came out of the conversation, again, these are things we're going to have to truth test, is that if you have now a 3-month relocation cost and you have these additional legal requirements, we're now having to put attorneys on retainer. We're having to pay attorneys to deal with this, and we're having to calculate the 3-month, and all that's going to happen is those costs are then going to be embedded as part of the expense and then go into the rent. And that was one of the things that they were talking about, is that it's just inherently going to add to the rental costs because they have to recover those expenses. Now, is it true? Don't know. I just know that that's what was communicated, and definitely we'll look into it and bring it back to you.
So I don't know who was first in this queue, so I'll go with Councilor Crest. Oops.
Oh,
Again.
okay, so, well, what I have heard is if you want a good rental rate, go to an independent local landlord. And what I hear from the landlords is they really go the extra distance to make sure that the person can afford the rent so that they don't have to have an eviction. You're just not going to get that with a lot of regulation. And also, we're trying to increase our naturally occurring rentals with ADUs. And a lot of, that's on your property. You're living very close with these people. So you want something that's a compatible situation. And I encountered, when I was talking in my neighborhood with people that provide these types of rentals, they said they had a tenant that was working late hours, they'd hear the garage door go up at 2 a.m. It just wasn't working out. So they actually agreed that their lifestyles were not similar. So the tenant found another ADU, more with a nurse, I guess, who was working second shift. And so anyway, these are things that can't be handled with regulation. And I think the more we leave that open to local landlords, the better off we are. So I agree with the opposition to this.
No, Councilor Martin.
Yeah, I mean, very, very reluctantly, so do I agree, because I think the first unintended consequence is people who live close to the area that they rent will be exiting the market, especially if it's on their property, in anticipation of problems like this, where they will be trapped and not have control over their property. And it's a really inconsistent thing for us to do, given that we are in favor of increasing the number of ADUs as a way to provide more housing options. So, like I said, extremely reluctantly, people whose activities I really support, like ECHO, are on the other side of this, but being for it as a matter of policy isn't the same as being for it in practice. So, yeah, I agree with Sandy's recommendation as well.
So we have two different, all of those who would like to oppose it, please raise your hand. So, okay. With the, okay.
Do you want us to bring it back with more information?
I would like that.
Or do you want to do oppose unless amended?
Let's bring it, can we have a motion then? Somebody make a motion. as to what it is you would like to do, and then we'll discuss it. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, either one, I'm, I'm okay. So I would move to have this brought back with more information so we can make a better informed decision.
Hidalgo Ferry wants it brought back with more information, seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. Now it's open for discussion. Councilor Martin.
There was one question that I wanted to ask Sandy, because, I think this is probably a good solution given where we are. But do you know when this is first scheduled to be heard by committee?
Let me look that up real quick.
Well, she's looking that up. If council wants us to bring it back, I know we were going to try to reach out to the fair housing attorney that we've contracted with to see if they, obviously, we're going to have the information we'll send to you, but we also want our own legal counsel to give us a read on it too.
When you're asking questions of that attorney, a good question is there a potential amendment that sort of is a little bit more empowering to the landlords under this and still provides main protections to the tenants? Because this is a really, I would want to exit being a landlord under this.
Well, she's looking that up, to give you a sense.
It's tomorrow, Sandy.
Oh, shoot.
1:30.
Well, that's the first hearing, right? So,
Transportation, Housing, and Local Government.
Yes, Mayor, 1:30 tomorrow.
It's been assigned.
yeah. So one thing is whether, no matter what we do, it's not going to affect that hearing, right?
I usually send these out tonight.
Okay.
I'll send it back out tonight.
So
but
one solution is you all
not
could
necessarily.
oppose unless amended, and then we could bring it back with more information as a potential solution.
Or you could wait and see if it comes out of committee
Yeah,
before
you
you
could do that,
continue
too.
down the road.
Right, because there are other shots at this.
That's true. This is just the first, this would be the first committee.
All right, well then let's go ahead and vote on Susie's.
Seeing no one else in the queue, let's vote. Let me see what so it was to direct staff to bring back 1098 with more information. No more discussion, let's vote. That passed 6-1 with Councilor Christ in opposition.
Thanks, Mayor.
It's worth discussing. Okay, let's see. We are now at final call, public to be invited to be heard. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address council? Seeing no one, we'll move on to mayor and council comments. Anyone want to make a comment here? Seeing no one in the queue, we'll move on to the city manager remarks. But let's go quite right to Eugene's city attorney remarks.
No comments, Mayor.
Okay.
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Second. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. That passed unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.